good to be here together. I've missed you. Just want to drink you in a little bit, if you don't mind. I just want my heart to just feel yours. And I invite you to just feel into your heart. Let it connect us one to another. Today I'm going to be talking about imaginations in times of trouble or difficult times. So I like to preface my talks with this, and that is, this is about to be a conversation. And the reason I call it a conversation is because what I'm asking, and what I know is true, is that there is the Christ consciousness within you that has prepared a message for you. And so I ask you to get present to that so you can hear that still small voice within you, that connection to your own Christ consciousness. Let's take a breath. Let us pray into this moment. Eternal loving presence, we gather in this sacred space. We intentionally connect heart to heart and raise the vibration of love together as a community. We understand and know that each and every one of us has Christ consciousness within us. And so we claim it right here and right now. And we allow it to guide us. And in the quiet of our heart, we say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And so it is. Amen. Beloved, today we are going to be talking about the power of imagination. How we utilize that as our spiritual practice. How we put that in motion so that we are co-creators with God. The power of imagination belongs to us. We utilize that. When life brings us loss and uncertainty or conflict, maybe even heartbreak, our first instinct as humans is often to focus on what is wrong. Yeah? What is wrong here? What's happening? It's our humanness. It's an instinct. It's what keeps us safe. And that's not a bad thing, especially if we recognize it for what it is. The mind begins to imagine the worst case scenario as if we can prevent it. We replay sometimes those painful conversations. We anticipate future, and sometimes we live in rooms that exist only in our minds and that are filled with anxiety. And those rooms aren't real. Those rooms are thought rooms. And we have a choice whether we walk into them and sit a while, or if we close the door and say thank you and come back to our own power of imagination. So many times unconsciously, we create images of fear. That's our response. Yet unity teaches us that imagination is one of our God-given spiritual faculties. And where there's God, there is no fear. So when we are truly utilizing this faculty in co-creation with God, fear dissipates. It moves on. It closes the door to those rooms of anxiety. So often as adults, we think of the imagination as something we daydream, or maybe that's child's play. You know, I gotta say, Lori, the song you chose today, from the Disney, it wasn't A Whole New World, it was the other one. It was the one that you always sang at the opener of the Walt Disney show. A dream is a wish. Thank you. I immediately felt comfortable and comforted by that song. I felt like it was 7 o'clock somewhere and I was about to have to go to bed. And this wonderful fairy was floating through and she takes her wand and she dots the star and I felt really good. So my imagination was really there. And my imagination in that way was there really comforting me. So we look at this power of imagination, and it's okay if it's child's play. May we all get to be children of God. Let me rephrase that. We all are children of God. May we remember that. May we get playful in that. Sometimes as adults, we forget that this is a sacred facility, a sacred power that we own. And oftentimes we're like, that was just my imagination. Anyone ever do that? Or you see a coincidence, an incident where you and God are having this beautiful flow moment, and you're like, I don't know if I believe that. That probably wasn't what I thought it was. We do that as adults often. We take ourselves out of the power of imagination. But the power of imagination is a sacred capacity to perceive possibilities beyond present appearances. And I think we've heard today there's been a lot of present appearances that would benefit for us to go and to imagine beyond what's happening now. To be real in the moment, to be human, to experience that, but then to also engage the spiritual power of imagination. Charles Fillmore wrote, "Imagination is the constructive form of thought by which we build the ideals and images that eventually become manifest in our lives." In times of difficulty, imagination becomes especially important because it determines whether we choose to be governed by fear or guided by faith. We cannot always control what happens. I found this out very acutely as I lay awake in bed and an earthquake took place. And I was in a little cottage on the mountain and I thought, is this really happening or is there just like a big truck rumbling outside on the road? No, I think this is an earthquake. I'm from Ohio. We've experienced earthquakes here of the very minute measure. This was like in Maui, it was like a stage 3 or something. And I thought I was in this little cottage. I actually got up to make sure I didn't slide down the mountain a little bit. Because my imagination was activated by what was happening. For sure. You know, it determines whether we have this wonderful faith experience or it determines whether we have a fear experience. And sometimes we're so beautiful and magical, we can be at the same time, or at least it feels that way because they're so close together. We cannot always control what happens to us, but we can choose the images we hold in consciousness. The Bible reminds us in Romans 12:21, it says, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." I gotta tell you, I don't like that word evil because I have old connotations for it. So I looked up what Charles Fillmore had to say about it. Evil is not an opposing cosmic force. Evil is the illusion born of our own false thinking. It's false thinking. It's broken thoughts. And sometimes it's practiced broken thoughts we've had over and over. And the way we overcome that is not by denying the pain. We don't get to spiritually bypass. I mean, we could make that choice. But there's so much more for us in choosing and understanding and not pretending that challenges don't exist. Because when we stop that pretending, when we get present to the moment, that's where we have the best opportunity to be love in action. We overcome in so many ways. By choosing this power of imagination, we overcome by envisioning a greater truth, remembering the truth of who we are. We imagine healing where there is hurt. We imagine understanding where there is conflict. Have you ever had to have a crucial conversation? You know you're walking into something, but you pause and you envision it going well. You envision the other wrapped in love. And then you have the conversation. Maybe it goes better than you thought it would. Or at the very least, you were triggered a little bit less. I know I had a conversation with my mom this week. She was upset. So she calls me and invites me to 1, 2, 3 fights right in a row. I was like, this is an interesting conversation. I was happy to report I did not take the bait. I was like, oh, it sounds like I'm being invited to some arguments. She's like, I don't think so, but I gotta go. And she hung up, and I thought, all right, I think I handled that all right. She called me back later, and she's like, oh, I think I was having a bit of a moment, and we had a good conversation. I, in the meantime, envisioned us having a good conversation. So many times we imagine, and we imagine well, the things and the places where there is lack. We lack peace here, we lack safety there. We get used to understanding and imagining those things. But when we imagine God's presence, we imagine God's presence where there is fear. And it is in those moments where, when we imagine God's presence, the idea of loneliness moves away. That feeling of abandonment or that feeling of being lost, it dissipates in the presence of God. And so I like to sometimes imagine God and I co-creating, as if God is a being separate from myself, which she is not. So I think of God as my higher self in this process of co-creating together. And in that process, I take time to dream. I take time to play games with myself, like, let's imagine I have $1 billion. What would I do with that? You'd be surprised how uncomfortable that game is for folks. They're like, $1 billion? I was like, yeah, $1 billion. What would you do? Because $1 billion feels limitless. And sometimes we imagine ourselves so limited on a regular basis that when you are invited to imagine yourself as limitless, it's uncomfortable. Folks feel untethered. Good. There's times when we really just need to be in that presence of God and we're co-creating together and what could happen. And then what's really interesting is to have that magical conversation with the universe where things show up out of nowhere. Here's an example. My dear friend Mary, who is making her transition, her life experience at some point was that her husband left her for her best friend. She's not a good friend with that friend anymore. But her husband married that friend, and so is the stepmother of her daughter. You can imagine there's a lot of entanglement there. And she was always very clear. No, I want to make peace, but I'm struggling to do that. And in the end, when her daughter was fearful as to how she might pay for cremation and the process of death, that woman called her, made the arrangements, and paid for it. That is something very difficult for my friend Mary to imagine. In fact, at one point we were like, should we even tell her? I don't know. We did. And I'm so glad we did, because it helped to release that entanglement. It helped to bring peace to a dying woman. And it was a powerful moment. And then we had to move into hospice. In hospice, the Medicaid would cover, or Medicare, her insurance would cover the cost of the health care, but not the room and board. I was like, what room and board? But it was $500 a day, and we were trying to figure that out, and we were looking for it, and I said, just stay open. And my friend Jen is a very skeptical person, and she was like, Natalie, what I don't need here is your woo-woo crap. I knew you before you were a minister. I know you. And I was like, that's fine. You go ahead and continue to see it. I'll go imagine all on my own. That's fine. And we walked into hospice, and we met with a social worker, and he explained that there is a fund to help cover the room and board. And so getting down to brass tacks, I asked, so how much will it cover? And he said, everything. Yeah. And my friend Jen looked at me, and she was like, I don't know, maybe there's something to this woo-woo stuff. People start having a lot of faith when it positively affects their finances. It's just interesting. You know, Jesus consistently invited people to see beyond appearances. Jesus was a way shower. He's showing us how to consistently be invited and invite others to see beyond appearances. He looks at illness and he imagines wholeness. He looked at outcast and he imagined a beloved child of God. He looked at the frightened world and imagined the kingdom of heaven right here and right now, not somewhere far away, within us, present among us. When difficult things happen, our imagination can become a bridge between what is and what can be. It allows us to hold a vision of divine possibility whilst taking love and putting it in action. Sometimes the very act of activating your imagination is all the action of love that is needed. This is how we become this love in action, when we intentionally use that power of imagination. We ask ourselves, if divine love were living through me now, if divine love were living through me now, what would it look like? What would it sound like? How would it respond? I had an opportunity to be present with my friend Mary as she was transitioning. And the last time I stood up here, I had shared with you, I might not make it to Hawaii before she makes her transition. And sure enough, she held on. And as soon as she saw me, we got to laughing so hard, she rallied for a whole week and a half. I thought, now she's not even going to transition while I'm here. It was interesting. It gave us opportunities to have real conversations. Like, we imagined what the afterlife is. A dear friend of mine once introduced me to the concept of death as a waking up on the other side. It is a knowing. And Mary at first was like, I'm going to miss you guys. And I didn't play into it. I was like, Mary, you're not going anywhere. You're going everywhere. And that was so comforting to her. And it was fun to imagine the other side. We talked about a different friend of mine who shared toward the end of her life how she heard such beautiful music. And that night, Mary dreamt about bluebell flowers in a meadow singing to her. I thought, I love this. That was comforting to me. And then, of course, I joked around with her and I said, Mary, I am very confident in this afterlife. So confident that when you get there, I'm going to hear you say, oh my God, Natalie, you were right. Because you know how I like to be right. There were moments during the sacred time where fear did creep in. As the body's process of shutting down happens. And we held that as a sacred understanding. And we moved into love at every moment that we could. And there were moments where I had no words, where my presence was all I had to offer. And in those moments, when I didn't know what to do, I would imagine myself as a beacon of peace. I just imagined the presence of love that was in that room, filling that room. Now, Mary's mother was someone who we were all there when she passed, and her name was Ruth. And we waited by her bedside for a long time. I'm like, this sounds familiar. And the nurse said, well, maybe if you guys go out to dinner, sometimes people like to pass when you're not there. So sure enough, we went to dinner, and before we even ordered, we got the call, Ruth had passed. And so Mary really didn't like that. And so we would be in the room and we would care with her, stay with her, and we would care for her. And then if we went out, we would tell her, now don't pull a Ruth on us. And so in the quiet of the moments, I was holding Mary's hand and I got thirsty. And I went out to get some water. And her daughter got a call from her cousin, and she went out on this beautiful patio. And by the time I got back, she was gone. She slipped out and pulled a Ruth. It wasn't distressing to me, but it was very distressing to her daughter. And so I called on my power of imagination, and I did what I just knew to do, and it was, Mary, I know you're everywhere. And so what we need from you right now is the biggest, boldest, most obvious, hit us over the head kind of sign you could give us. And her daughter Jen's like, I don't know about this. And then I looked up, and I was looking out the window. And Jen stood up, and she turned around, and she looked out the window. And there was the biggest, boldest rainbow you had ever seen. A minute later, and Jen, the skeptic, looked at me and she said, Mom made it over. She said, I know, because my mom's favorite poem was, look for me in the rainbows. And there's been so many signs. I just know that I know that I know. And when I forget, as soon as I remember, I imagine the truth that is there for me. And I co-create with God this experience of life that is life-supporting. And that's the power of imagination that we have. And we do this together. There were people in this community that prayed for me constantly. And I know because I felt it. Not because you told me. I could have blown that off as I'm just imagining things. But I said to myself, no, I'm imagining things with intention in this now moment and this now moment. Our power of imagination is not to be discounted. It's to be activated. It belongs to us as an activation to our creation and our co-creation with God. That's what it's there for. So yesterday there was a shooting 2 blocks from my house. Ward and I were standing in my front yard. We didn't hear it. We didn't know. We just heard the emergency vehicles flooding to that area. 12 people were shot in this senseless incident. And in those moments to follow, people were just pulsing with adrenaline. And so we listened. And I listened as people said, oh my gosh, what if it was me? They were imagining, oh no, what if it was them? Because it's the human instinct out of fear to imagine those things. And it's not wrong to do that. It's our human nature. But as soon as we remembered, as soon as the shock lifted even the littlest bit, in any moment of calm that I could feel, I imagined healing. I imagined peace. And I imagined love. And I knew that it was working because there were 3 little girls that were there, and they ran up to us and they told us what happened. Because I was imagining myself as a place of love and a place of peace, I began to become a place of love and a place of peace for them to tell their story. That's love in action. It's what we all do when we remember to be intentional with our power of imagination. So I'm going to ask this community of unity and love, to be love in action with me right here and right now. I want you to take a breath. If you feel comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. And I'm going to ask us, to the best of our ability, to envision this city returning to a deep and abiding love. Whether you imagine this as a feeling, or whether you see in your mind's eye strangers holding hands or embracing, or maybe you can hear the music of 1,000 voices in harmony. Or maybe you are able to envision the golden light of Christ enveloping it all. Let us take a moment and use our power of imagination to be a beacon of light right now. And let's take a breath and give thanks for this power of imagination. When we imagine from the consciousness of love, we are love in action. Our vision becomes our action. Our faith becomes a witness. Our imagination becomes a channel through which God expresses healing and the transformation of the world. I want to leave you today with an affirmation. Haku, if you'll put the affirmation up, I want you to receive it as I read it to you. And then we will read it together, empowered by one another. The affirmation is, I am guided by divine imagination. I see beyond appearances to the truth of God's presence. I envision healing, peace, and possibility. Love thinks through me, moves through me, and acts through me. I am love in action, and all is unfolding in divine order. Let's say that together. I am guided by divine imagination. I see beyond appearances to the truth of God's presence. I envision healing, peace, and possibility. Love thinks through me, moves through me, and acts through me. I am love in action, and all is unfolding in divine order. And so it is. Amen.
If you would like to support this content and others like it, please give at unityoftoledo.com, where love is an everyday experience.